Man, I get so many questions about my double pedal settings, I figured I'd just do a video about it. So in this video, you're gonna learn about the spring tension, the different VDL settings, my beater, tightness and looseness, so you can get a better idea of how to set up your pedals, specifically the Axis A Longboards, to get the best double bass drumming results. One thing before we get into all the nitty-gritty of these pedals is that all these settings work for me. They might not work for you, so just keep that in mind when you're setting up your pedals. So let's go over to the drums, take a look, and I'll give you some tips and tricks for your pedals on your drum set. The first thing we're gonna talk about is spring tension, and I feel like a lot of drummers get this wrong because it's actually quite opposite as to what you think. Now you gotta keep in mind that we wanna keep the pedal in working order that works with us and not against us. And if you have really tight springs or really loose springs, you're gonna notice you're gonna have to work a lot harder to get the same stroke or movement out of your foot. So ideally we wanna keep our foot and the pedal following our foot when we do the stroke. The pedals are basically an extension of our foot, so whatever our feet play, we want to translate properly into our pedals. Now with that being said, I want to show you how I set up my spring tension. All right, so this here is my slave pedal on my Axis A Longboards. And right here is what's called micro tune. Basically, it's so you don't have to take your pedal off of the kick drum or off of the ground to adjust it, because the original designs, you had to do that from this little piece down here. Now, thankfully, with this design, all you have to do is have a drum key. Hopefully you can find it. And you basically just micro tune the tension. Now, when it comes to spring tension, especially with me, I'm about halfway from super tight and from super loose. Now, when you turn this thing right, it's gonna go tighter. When you go left, it's gonna go loosey. The idea with me keeping it relatively loose is so that it actually follows my foot. And this is something you gotta really keep in mind when you're trying to adjust your pedals and adjust your spring tension on your own pedals, because again, we're all different and we're all gonna react differently, and our pedals will react differently. If you notice that your foot's slapping the pedal and then it does the motion, then your pedal is non-responsive. Now, before we move on to the other double pedal settings, I want to show you one little hack that I did with the original Axis drive shaft on my AL2s. Because they're round, obviously the drive shafts slip more. Axis has since updated this, and every pedal that ships out of their warehouse now comes with the newly upgraded drive shaft. So you'll notice here, obviously it's round, but if you look closely right here, you'll notice I actually ground down a flat spot, so the set screw didn't slip. Now, if you're gonna go ahead and do this, I want you to be aware of where you're actually gonna sand the spot in here, because once you do that, you can't go back. You can take away the metal, but you can't add it. Now, it's important that you press your beater up against the skin if you're gonna try and line up the drive shaft to sand it. If you don't feel comfortable doing that, you can always order yourself a new one. And that brings me on to the next part. I want to show you the VDL system on these pedals. If you don't have it on your pedals, don't worry, but it's just something a little extra for the Axis pedal guys and girls. Hell, maybe it's even interesting if you don't own Axis pedals and you just want to learn about it. So here are my VDL settings. VDL, I'm pretty sure, is an acronym in short for variable drive lever, and that's this guy right here, okay? And what's gonna happen when I put my drum key on here to loosen it, I drag this back, and the pedal actually drops. So if I go to the top here to the VDL and I lift it up all the way forward, you see how it jumps up like that? All the way down, all the way up. And what's cool about that is for when I do heel toe, my foot is not all the way up like this all the time. So I'm not having to do a big motion to do my double strokes. And what's really important about that VDL, especially for heel toe drumming, is that it kind of flattens the foot out. So I'm able to do a smaller stroke, so I could repeat that a lot faster, so I can get better and more efficient heel toe technique on my double pedal. Moving on to my choice of drum beaters. A lot of people think they're the red Gibraltar wood beaters, but they are not. So let's take a look at that and my reasoning behind that, and I'll show you how tight I put my kick drum head to so I can do heel toe and ankle technique with ease. Now, originally I had the Lowboy beater custom beaters on here, the lightweights, but I found they were actually too lightweight. With these pedals and the combination of those beaters, I felt I couldn't really feel the stroke under my foot or the impact into the kick drum. And the way I solved that problem was to get some heavier beaters. These are actually the Danmar wood beaters. Now you see guys like Gene Hoglan using these quite a bit. I found that by adding actual heavier beaters to my kick drum allowed for a nice, better rebound. And not only that, but I could feel more of the hits in my feet. And it's really important, right? You want to be able to hear and play exactly what you want to play. So you got to be able to feel it well. So my beaters are all the way up at the bottom of this, and the reasoning behind that is so it strikes more towards the center of the kick drum. Why I do that is because you get a better sound. And even though I'm triggering this, I still like to use the microphone on the front of my kick drum to help blend samples and acoustic sounds. Okay, so we looked at the beaters, we looked at the drive shaft, and we looked at the spring tension on the slave pedal. The right pedal is a little different, and for some reason my right foot is obviously stronger because it leads all the time and I've got more use of that foot. But I want to show you the extra little spring that comes on these pedals, what it does and how I use it and what the spring tension is on those too. Come on. Now this spring is set to a little bit over half just to compensate for the loss of power in this drive shaft. Right, you got to think from the slave pedal, the power has to go through one universal joint, through the drive shaft, through another universal joint, and then into this. So there's a little bit of lag, and that's basically what the tension on this spring is going to help alleviate. That's a little bit higher than normal, but it really helps, and I find that it gives me a better even swing. Now with the right pedal, I have it a little tighter than my left foot. For some reason, my left foot seems to do double strokes a little easier, but to get rebound out of this right one, I have to add a little bit more spring tension. And the VDL on this is set a little bit further back than the other one. And just for some reason, all these little micro adjustments can really throw you off, but for me, it really helped me. And it took me 3 years to find my settings, right? Because I went from Tama iron cobras to these. So we covered the spring tension, we covered the beaters, we covered the VDL, the micro tune, all that good stuff. But let's take a look at the bass drum batter head tension. And I'll give you my reasons why it is the way it is. I just want to show you how tight that is. Like, it's almost tabletop tight. And here's the trick. Obviously, when you're triggering and you're doing heel toe or double strokes, you want it to be nice and tight so you can get the rebound. But that with looser spring tension will help you get more power, right? But you just have to learn how to control your pedals. Now, one issue I did run into was this. You see how my kick drum is pretty much straight up and down? Well, before the top was actually leaning towards me a little bit. And so what was happening was my beater was actually only touching it at the very top of the beater. And what that was doing was actually digging into my batter. So over the course of like 2 months, I ended up blasting through 2 kick drum heads. And I called my rep at Evans. I said, you know what, man, I feel like a complete idiot because I finally figured out why that was happening. Just a tip for you here. Try and make sure if you find that you're not getting the full surface area struck on the beater to just adjust and compensate with your kick drum, right? Make sure it's not leaning too far forward or too far away. And while that might be advantageous to some people, I feel like if you have more contact with your kick drum, there's more force to come back with response in rebound. So just keep that in mind when you're setting up all of your pedals and your kick drum and everything else around it. Now, I'm not going to get into all of my trigger settings, so if you want to see a video solely on that topic of discussion, just let me know down in the comments below. And again, if you have any questions about your specific double bass, want to follow this playlist here to learn more about double bass drumming, then I'll put it up here and you go watch those videos right now. We all need to practice. We all need stuff to learn. So here's a playlist. Check it out. You'll be a better drummer for doing it. Thanks so much for watching. My name's Fleury, and I'll see you in the next video. Go now. Go watch it.